energy target, which is certainly worse than direct action and should be dumped. One of the few scientifically literate voices on the coalition side. One of the he's actually very impressive on the Joint Strike Fighter, so I do line up with Mr. Jensen.
Order.
Through you,
Order.
Through you, Deputy
Yes,
President.
please.
The interjections are so tantalising I can scarcely ignore them. But Mr. Jensen, obviously one of the few on the coalition benches with scientific credentials, is a climate change denier. What on earth are we to make of that? It's not just the federal Liberal Party room. Our present Treasurer in Western Australia, former Executive Director of the IPA, Minister Mike Nahan, had said not only is the fact of global warming unclear, but a fully honoured Kyoto Agreement would have only a trivial effect on temperatures. In a nutshell, a remarkably condensed way of thoroughly misreading the science and the geopolitics of global warming. I'm not sure I could do that any better myself. Hello,
Order.
Senator Macca. Lovely that you could join us.
Order.
There was a book launched last year, edited by Peter Christoph, that scoped out what a 4-degree world looks like. And it doesn't sound like a great deal, and the temperature obviously in this town will fluctuate by a matter of 20 or 30 degrees in a day, but an increase of global mean surface temperatures of 4 degrees, which puts an absolute blowtorch on the North and South poles. The book was titled 4 Degrees of Global Warming, Australia in a Hot World, and it effectively mapped to the greatest degree of precision possible, obviously with wide ranges of interpretation on what Australia looks like under those kind of conditions, under the conditions that are set in train by policies of this coalition government and your Tea Party allies in other parts of the world, where effectively we just say, let it rip, just burn everything. It's not the world that I believe that we are heading for, and it's not something I think any of us would want to pass on to the next generation and the ones after that. But nonetheless, there is some precision, some estimates available on exactly how dangerous that world would be. Australia in a 4-degree world, 250,000 coastal properties inundated by rising sea levels at an approximate cost of $63 billion. There aren't a lot of global warming deniers in the insurance community, funnily enough. There's a lot of sceptics, a lot of very hard-headed people trained in actuarial science in the insurance industry, and they estimate up to $63 billion. They are already refusing to insure people in particularly vulnerable parts of the country. 17,200 heat-related deaths a year, up from just under 6,000 today. Snow disappears from all but the highest alpine peaks, which leads to a cascade of regional extinctions in those ecosystems. 250,000 people in the Asia-Pacific region displaced, as these communities somehow have to try and choose between defence and evacuation of coastal settlements, fishing grounds, places where people have lived for millennia. 250,000 people. And the shrieking that we hear from the government benches about the tiny fraction of people who've managed to escape from our region, from the horrors perpetrated by the Sri Lankan government or the Iranian secret police or the Taliban. Can you imagine? Yeah, Senator McDonald, sometimes I really feel for you, because you won't be around when these impacts are really in full swing. But my little nephew will, and he didn't get to vote last September. He didn't get to vote last September. The reason that I bring the issue, well, one more would have helped. The issue of displaced people in our region, Senator McDonald, since you've queried my comments, through you, Mr. Acting Deputy President, are that can you imagine the politics of immigration and border protection with 250,000 people on the move? These are credible estimates. These are coming from people who study these things for a living, from people inside the US defence community, from inside the United Nations. It's not possible to adapt gracefully, I wouldn't have thought, to mass movement of people on that kind of scale. Colleagues, there is still time, and the Senate vote just earlier this afternoon has proven that the Senate's reputation as a house of second thoughts is well grounded. And the smartest thing that we could do today would be to leave the Climate Change Authority in place so that it can continue to provide the advice that we need on the mitigation options, on the adaptation strategies, and on ways that our country and our region can survive in a world threatened by the very serious life or death impact